Thank you, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here today. I would like to talk to you about a project that we have put in operation in 2014 at the Raglan mine in northern Quebec in the Arctic. And from this project now in operation for 3 years, there was a tremendous amount of lesson learned. So I'll try to share some of that today. So just a note for Hatch, we work in 3 different sectors: mining, energy, and infrastructure. But one of the things we did in recent years is to concentrate all our power expertise to the mining industry and to the infrastructure. Infrastructure would be like microgrid in a port, for instance, and in mining it's remote locations and combining wind, solar, energy storage with gensets. We have been doing projects worldwide on the hybrid power type of projects, whether it's for remote mining or remote communities. So on the map here, it just shows you projects we did in North America, South America, Africa, and Australia. It's a global market. It's really expanding significantly. I guess you being here today is a sign of that. And so we're very excited to continue contributing to this type of projects. We did about 50 projects. Most of them showed to be non-economical. The Raglan mine worked with subsidies. So like the Red Dog mine, 12 megawatt, it's in the Arctic, 3 months only available for the port. The economic and logistic of doing this project would have been fine if the price of diesel had remained at the price of 2014. So we've been in there for 10 years. So at the beginning, we were convincing mine that it was a good idea. We were really preaching. And now we're no longer preaching. Everybody knows they want to do this, but the price of diesel went down. So without subsidies, most of the projects cannot go forward. Rio Tinto in Madagascar, life of mine was the issue there. So we deal with those problems that you've got fantastic projects. The wind and solar resource is spectacular, but there's always a glitch for these projects to go forward. And that we learned from all the studies we've done throughout the world. We've done work for the utilities. It's changing. The utilities wants to do remote projects. In Canada only, we have 200 villages with price of diesel above $1, $1.50. You're looking at 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So you can really do high penetration systems. You can displace 60 to 80% of the fossil fuel. So that's great. Those projects are feasible if you take in consideration all the costs. The cost of fuel is 1/3 of the cost. The other third is the maintenance of the equipment, and the last third is the environmental impacts. You get one spill in 40 years, and that $10 million to clean the land pays 10 times for the hybrid power system. So today you need to be creative to make these projects to go forward by looking at all the costs. So the wind power at the Raglan mine, it's a beautiful project that started in 2009 with the measurement campaign. What we observe as a lesson learned, it's very costly to put wind tower in remote locations. It's $100,000 to $150,000. At most of the mine, we install the measurement equipment on the communication towers. So we lower the costs. It's not as high as a tower, but it gives us good wind, and then we send a LiDAR to complete the measurement for a few months. So we get much better measurements for much less money. That's a small map, but that's the map of Canada, and Raglan mine is the green spot there. It's very, very far. Thought it's relatively easy to get to. It's 4 hours of flight from Montreal to the mine, so not such a big deal. There's a flight every day. Shorter than going from Brisbane to Perth, which I did, and that was long. After doing Montreal to Vancouver, it's just twice the same length. So the Glencore mine is a beautiful mine. It has been in operation since 1990, so it's very robust. The grid is robust, 16 megawatts of power. It's an autonomous grid, 10 gensets, life of mine 20 years, perfect project to implement a wind power system. When we did this project, the oil price, the diesel price was at $1, now it's below 70 cents. We're working on the second wind turbine right now, and the economics is like very, very borderline. And we still got $8 million in subsidies, and we're still breaking even. So not easy, but that's the perfect environment to integrate wind power because of the mine is long, the resource is as good as what Mike said this morning in Australian garnet, 9.5 meter per second. It's spectacular, but you have that situation that the economic is still very good. It's very difficult to do right now. So that's the beautiful wind turbine, one single one. We could have installed many small ones. We decided to install one big one. Those lights, the northern lights, are real, so it's not a fake. That's someone stayed overnight and make that nice picture. So it's very, very far north. For the energy storage loop that we put at Raglan Mine is a demonstration project. So it's not in a megawatt size. Everything is sized to 200 kilowatt. We wanted to test the different types of energy storage to know what would be the best for scaling the project up. So we put a lithium-ion battery, we put a flywheel, we put an electrolyzer and fuel cell with the hydrogen tanks that you see. You see, to get the grant, we needed to put hydrogen because it had to be innovative. So very innovative. Don't do hydrogen in the Arctic. Okay, so I was against it, but you just need someone to babysit the system every single minute. It's just crazy. But it's a demonstration project, right? So we learn. And the economics doesn't work. 25% round-trip efficiency for the hydrogen loop, the battery 94, the flywheel 89. So hydrogen doesn't work that way. If you do power to gas, that's different. If you make hydrogen and use it as a fuel in a car, or you inject it in a pipeline, that makes sense because the efficiency of the electrolyzer is 80%. But there are no pipelines in the Arctic. So some of the challenge at that site, the temperature is minus 30 for more than 3 months. So the wind turbine needs to operate up to minus 40. Otherwise, you lose most of the wind power during the most windy months. You have severe icing conditions, so you need de-icing on the wind turbines. The intercon turbine is the only turbine in the world that has those features. Siemens has similar things, but they don't go to minus 40. They go to minus 30, which doesn't work for Raglan. Mining operation, the variability of wind, a lot of people talked about solar. Solar is easier, relatively speaking, easier to integrate. Wind power, it's another beast. It's really very variable. You can lose your total wind power in less than 10 minutes. So, and it's not predictable. You cannot predict the next 5 minutes. You cannot predict the next seconds. You can predict the next 6 hours. Windy day, not windy day. You can predict the trends, but the wind is 100% stochastic. Solar, you can predict if there's a cloud coming, you can predict that. If it's sunny, it's sunny. Only a cloud would change the power. So that is something we learn to deal with. And the operator, because of that, has to be on their tippy toes every moment. If the wind power falls, they have to start a genset very quickly. In the Arctic, it takes 20 minutes to start a genset. You have events that stop the wind turbine, icing events, turbulent wind, cut-off wind speed, and so forth. And there are many other reasons. For whatever reason, the wind turbine stops and restarts within seconds. But you have those 3 megawatt events that the operator can rack their brain about how to deal with that. So energy storage is the key to help us, but it kills the business case. Nevertheless, so here's an example of icing on the wind turbines. We lose here 50% of the power because of the icing accumulation. That's the anemometer. You see the antenna, that's where the wind speed is being measured. Those are heated, that's why the antennas are not frosted, but everything else is full of ice. One of the challenge for the logistic, you can see we had to go through a bridge, and the bridge were pretty much the size of the biggest piece base of the wind turbine. Frankly, we had less than 2 centimeters to go through. We had to deflate the tires, we had to remove the guardrail, and we did have to pray. And it did work. Here's a spider foundation. This is very interesting because in remote location, not necessarily in the Arctic, but in remote location, the cost of making concrete is very expensive. And so with a spider foundation, you pre-assemble everything in the south, and you bring it to the site without the need for concrete. So you need about 20% of the concrete that otherwise you would need, well, you need 80% less concrete for doing a spider foundation. So it reduced the cost of the wind turbine foundation. Also, the foundation is anchored in rock. So in the case of the Arctic, typically the permafrost is such that the rock is brittle and you cannot do a gravity-based foundation. So that kind of foundation works very well. The architecture for the Raglan mine projects, you see the wind turbine, the lithium-ion battery, the hydrogen loop, and the flywheel, and about 10 gen sets, and a microgrid controller that we developed for this project that controls the batteries, the hydrogen, the flywheel, and the wind turbines and the gen sets. That gives you an example of how variable the wind can be within a day. It just that's the red line, that's the variations, and the green line is what, if you were to integrate 100% of the wind, you would produce the green line. So one of the big challenge in hybrid power, and maybe that was not enough discussed today, is that people that are expert in wind power and solar power, they do the P50, okay? But you need to do the P50 in terms of integration. Okay, you're not going to integrate 100% of your wind power. This morning, the presentation of Australian Garnet, only 50% was integrated of the wind. The rest is gone, and batteries won't help that. Wind doesn't integrate well with energy storage and high penetration because it's not cyclical, it's not predictable. So your battery gets full, and the wind is blowing strong for 3 days. So you lose all that power. Solar, you charge during the day, you discharge during the night. You have a cycle. At high penetration, solar beats wind. Even though solar is more expensive in CapEx, when you do high penetration, solar beats wind. But you have a higher CapEx, but you have higher penetration level, so you'll displace more diesel. So that's the controller again. I won't go over it, but the controller is the centerpiece that dispatch the gen sets that curtail the wind or the solar and ensure to smooth out all the variation of renewable power through charging and discharging the energy storage. And this is a graphic here that shows the blue line is without storage. That's the wind power variation within 5 seconds. This is 5 seconds. See how from 3 megawatt to 2.4 megawatt, it varies very highly. But when you couple with the flywheel and the battery, it's the blue color and the green color, you smooth out the wind power variation to get the red line. And in very small letters, you'll see that the kilowatt per second variation is 10 times smaller because of that smoothing effect. And so in a sense, you can talk about controllers and all complex stuff, but if you integrate wind with energy storage and the output is smooth, then for the point of view of the grid, it becomes just a negative load. And then you don't have issues. You don't have to change the network. So for brownfield, it's a concept of plugging system with coupling wind, solar, and energy storage to get smooth out signals. Some data analytics. I mean, in terms of generations, the operators of the gensets operate the full project. They operate the gensets, they operate the wind and solar power. They don't do the maintenance. That requires skills. You need to have the technicians to go and cater to any problems you have within your renewable power. That's technicians, but the technicians are not operating. The operators are the one that looks at the load and try to dispatch the proper wind solar energy storage with the gensets to maintain grid stability. So the operators are the mine operators, or if it's given to a third party, they will be responsible for integrating the full load. And it's very challenging if everything is not automatic, which the best case is you try to train people to do as much as they can manually without energy storage to get the better economic for the project. But it's a lot more, for young people it's exciting because they have a lot of things to do during the day. But without wind or solar power, the gensets operation is much smoother, and you can predict that the load will increase in an hour and so forth. But with wind power, every 5 minutes, if you're not near the desk, you might be late to do some events. What we've learned is that the first year for the wind turbine, we were in the Arctic as well. So we did, for 1 year, had to fix a lot of things, glycol loops that broke, electrical systems that froze, and need heaters within the wind turbine. So for the first year, we had to fix a lot of different things. So we had 2 people, well, 1 person full-time in rotation every 2 weeks all year long. That cost $300,000 to have those 2 people rotating all year long. So that increased the cost of operation. But for the second year, we realized the wind turbine was beautiful, no issues anymore. So we're now sending people every 3 weeks just to do a site visit. And we go on call. The flights are leaving every day, so on call, if the wind turbine stops, we go. Yes, we lose more power, because sometimes it will take 2 or 3 days to restart the wind turbine, but we save nearly $300,000 in OPEX. On the other hand, we have remote surveillance, 24/7. So we know at any moment what's happening. That's the first line support. They talk to dispatch of the manufacturer, and they try to handle the problem. Then it goes to second support and third support. And this way we minimize the cost, and we know we're in control of what's happening at all time. When everything is beautiful, the green line, which is the potential power, and the red line are equal. On the right side, you see that the green is higher than the red. That means the wind turbine is iced up, and so it's losing about 10-20% of power there. When it's really bad, and that's the most important issue for all of you doing those projects, on that day, most of the power, you can see the green is much higher than the red, and the red is flat. The operators curtail the wind. Okay? Now, the 24/7 support was important because we called the operator, what are you doing? I mean, you have a PPA, we're losing money. They say, well, you know, our genset is broken and the cruncher is not working, so the load is smaller. We can't afford integrating the full wind power. So we need to be on our toes all the time because we have a PPA agreement with the mining and the IPP. So that's a situation where you lose all your money and you don't meet your business case at the end of the day. That is extremely important. Do your homework very, very carefully because that's where you lose most of your money in a project. So last word, but before the last word, I will say one thing. All the energy storage that we installed, they all underperformed. Okay? So they did not do the duty cycle that we asked to be able to cycle 3 times within a minute without heating up. The capacity to meet the energy storage of 250 kilowatt hour, maybe one was 220. The speed at which they react, some were too slow. The hydrogen system was 10 times slower. So we had to fix that through the warranty. But it's just, energy storage is beautiful, but it's very recent, and you don't have track record, not enough track records, particularly in those type of environments. So don't believe everything you're being told. And if you don't believe it, make sure that in the contract you've got a way to not be penalized because the energy storage doesn't do what it's supposed to be doing. Procurement is extremely important in the project. Lithium-ion battery, you can kill the lithium-ion battery within 7 years, even though it says it could be 10 to 15 years, even though it's warranted. If you happen to cycle it more than you had told the vendor, they will say the warranty doesn't apply. Very important. The lithium-ion batteries aged up, and they can also take fire. So I'm just saying be very careful because the cost is in the energy storage, and there's a big risk over there. So in a sense, hybrid power is certainly a way to lower your cost of energy, But right now, you need a carbon tax, you need subsidies, you need ways to make this project work. They work in some environment, but most of the places, it just doesn't work without subsidies. But there's a will. Everyone wants to meet the Paris Agreement. I think everybody is highly motivated. We did 50 projects. I would have liked to have at least 10 implemented, but really it doesn't work. So we need to work with the governments that, in Quebec, for instance, we have $400 million subsidies per year because we have a carbon market. So the money they make from the carbon market, they use that money in subsidies to implement projects. Clever. Okay, but we're the only province that has that right now in Canada. So in Australia, you have ARENA, so that's really key. It's important, and we need that, and we'll need that for a while, and then eventually it will move forward. Even in the States, wind and solar only still has 30% subsidies for the projects, and they deliver projects at 2.5 cents. Still, they have the subsidies. So subsidies is the way to develop renewable power still today. Energy storage is key to do higher penetration. It's very costly, but you need to size appropriately. And the cost of energy storage is decreasing. I'll give you a story. Hydro-Quebec is the utility just next door. They have a lithium-ion battery that has 15,000 cycles. Okay? So it beats Tesla, it beats Toshiba. It's 20-year long battery. So I'm saying that's where we're going. We're going with technologies that will work for 20 years. We're not yet there, but in 5 years to 10 years, it's going to be there, and the prices will go down to $400 per kilowatt hour to $100 per kilowatt hour, which is the case for the lithium-ion battery of Hydro-Quebec. Because of the 15,000 cycles, you get lower price per cycle. On that, thank you.